This is a special episode, and we are releasing this for you on the other side of this who may be experiencing a sabbatical right now. Maybe you're heading into a sabbatical, or you are considering it down the line in the future, either secretly or you've already talked to your missions board or your elder team about this. The last thing is you may know somebody who is experiencing a sabbatical or who is thinking about it, and maybe they are terrified. Friends, we want to demystify sabbatical. That's part of what we do here at Stay Forth. And on this episode, I've got a friend and a sabbatical coach here at Stay Forth, Chad Lunsford, and we are going to kind of share our hearts behind this, and we are going to share an episode from the past that we've recorded that actually is incredibly helpful for you right now. So Chad, welcome to the podcast.
So good to be back here with you, Alan. And we love, like you said, we love helping demystify sabbatical. I went on my very first sabbatical after 21 years of leadership, and I knew it was time for a break, but I had no idea, like 99% of people, that might have the opportunity or thinking about sabbatical, wanting to ask their leadership board for a sabbatical. They know they need the break, but they don't know what to do. And I'm so glad that you and I were already in a leadership coaching journey together that was just really dovetailed beautifully into my sabbatical. And I really had kind of 90 plus days pegged out in the middle of a really important transition in our life and leadership. And I had no idea really how to map it out. What was okay, what wasn't, what should it be, what should it not be? And you really helped me design what I call, it was an A+ sabbatical experience, partly because of what we did. I got the opportunity to travel to Italy with my bride, and we got to take our kids to Paris, and those were incredible opportunities. But some of the smaller things we did too, like going for bike rides in our neighborhood, having a picnic by a pond just a few miles down the road, those things were just as beautiful as well. But by the time I got to the end of my sabbatical, what we've talked about in different podcasts is, I'm really living and leading in a much different way with lighter rhythms and somehow having more impact on the backside of my sabbatical than when I was working a lot harder on the front side. And so I've experienced sabbatical being an incredibly life-giving opportunity and gift. And that's where we really want to help others lean into as well.
One of the greatest surprises of my life is that I'm doing sabbatical coaching.
Same.
I actually got to experience. I did not see it coming. This was not the plan. I didn't even know it was a thing, which is one reason why I think it's been so valuable to others, because there are not many who do sabbatical coaching. And especially if you're a pastor here, there are not many who understand the rigors of being a pastor. And Chad's been a pastor for over 20 years. I served as a pastor for 13. And now I coach many, many pastors across the country. So we understand the challenges and the burdens of that. And so my first sabbatical that I was gifted was 10 weeks. My kids were small. It was a gift to be able to just be a present dad. And my next sabbatical was marked by a lot more adventure. My kids were old enough that I was able to take them to some really cool places. And it felt like it was more for me. The first one felt like it was more for my family to have their dad around. And I had some moments of replenishment, but my kids were small. And so it was a lot of work, actually. My second was a chance for me to zoom out and look ahead. And so each season of life is different. Sabbatical is different for each person. And our hope is to demystify the process of sabbatical. We have 3 phases that we'll talk later in this episode. And so what we've done is we've actually put 2 episodes together. And our aim is this: we want to be helpful. We want to be helpful. There are other people who have spoken into and written into sabbatical. We're so grateful for that. But for us, we've tried to create very simple, practical ways, like Chad was talking about, for you to plan. What am I supposed to do? What is helpful during this time? How do I structure this? How to experience it and actually walk through it in a way that's helpful and depressurized in many ways, but also forward-looking and vision-infused. And then the most important part, how do I reintegrate or reorient to life, to the work and to rest and to family and to way that I'm living the rhythms of my life? So what we're going to do here is we're going to replay an episode for you where we first start with why. Why does sabbatical matter? And what do we mean by sabbatical? And it's very, very important that we start with these foundations. So We're going to head into that episode, and then we'll catch you in between that one and the next one. So we hope that this first episode helps you to demystify why. Why does sabbatical matter? And secondly, what? What is sabbatical? We get it. You're busy. You want to grow, and we want to help. You're passionate about your craft because it deeply matters to you. Your faith is important. It's your foundation. At Stay Forth, we coach leaders to avoid burnout, live and lead with clarity, purpose, and from a place of health. We want you to experience long-term impact. Welcome to the journey. This is something that we want to demystify for you today. Sabbatical is something that's understood, misunderstood, and actually has quite a few consequences when we don't understand it correctly. And so that's our hope. We're actually doing a two podcast series here where we're going to, this first one, talk why, what, and a little bit of the how. We're actually going to dive in deeper in the next one. But what we want to say is that this is just an invitation. This is just the beginning. Chad and I do sabbatical coaching. And during that time, we'll actually walk through these three different phases of this. We demystify it for folks, and we've seen just incredible results. And Chad will share, kind of some of his. I got to walk through the process with him. Secondly, we have a webinar coming up. We realize that listening in audio is just not enough. And so we want you to mark your calendars for March 1st. You can check it in the show notes. You can see it on our site. And we are going to demystify sabbatical. If you are a team wondering, should we quote unquote send someone on sabbatical? What's next for me as a leader on sabbatical, a spouse, a friend? Just show up and learn. This is going to be a great time. So without further ado, Chad, give us a little bit of your background and especially your background around sabbatical.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so excited to be here today to share and specifically on this topic, a little bit of a background on me. So I've been in ministry for over 20 years, all over the country and in different roles, from ministry residency to teaching pastor, campus pastor, and even church planner, from smaller churches to mega churches. And so I've had the privilege of wearing a lot of different hats, which means I've experienced a lot of the different pressure points in ministry. I've been married to my beautiful bride, Katie, for over 21 years. We have 3 kids, 2 of which are teenagers. So a lot of the pressure points that the leaders are experiencing and feeling, I have felt them and feel them now. And in terms of sabbatical, it's interesting, right? We all have ideas of what sabbatical is. And, for me, as I was watching other leaders go on sabbaticals, some would go on writing or sort of work retreats. So they would stop one work and go do other work. Some would go on extravagant vacations. Some would do mission trips, and all are great things. But as I was really approaching a season of burnout, I knew I just needed rest. I wasn't sure what sabbatical was, but I knew I needed rest. And I felt like, after 20 plus years of ministry, that my marriage and my kids had both often been put on the back burner, especially coming into sabbatical. We had been church planning for 6 years, and just so much time went into that. I knew I needed a break. And so a little over a year ago, started planning that process. And I didn't know what I wanted or needed. Again, just knew I needed to rest. And I was so glad that you and I were already in a coaching partnership because I was able to work with you to make sure that I was setting up sabbatical for exactly what I needed, not just what I thought I needed. And it was so refreshing and replenishing for me, and honestly for my entire family. We were able to make memories that'll last a lifetime, but I came out of it replenished and really refocused for our next season of ministry. So it was an incredible experience, even though I went into it with a lot of question marks. But I would love to hear from you, Alan. Like, what was your introduction into sabbatical?
Yeah, and first of all, I love that phrase, pressure points, because every sabbatical is unique. And so I experienced sabbatical. I'll share about that. It was pretty ideal where we were already doing leadership coaching, and then just to shift over. That's very normal, by the way. A lot of folks who you and I are coaching will either receive leadership coaching after sabbatical because you realize I got a good thing going on here. I'm clarified and replenished. I want to keep this movement going on. And I get to do a lot of leadership coaching with folks, and it leads into the realization that I need replenishment. So, the burning wasn't, or the building wasn't burning or falling down for you. But you began to see, this would be a great opportunity. And it was.
That's right. Yep.
Man, I pastored for 13 years and was grateful that I was actually at a church that had a sabbatical policy. And so whether you thought you needed it or not, it was coming for you every 5 years. And so I got to experience 2 sabbaticals. And what I say is that I did the best I could, Chad, with the resources that I had. I'm an intentional dude, so I was reading books about it. I was reaching out to people. I was asking for their best advice. And with all of that, I was able to tee up about a C-. And I had 10 weeks, busy family time, as little kids at home. I was still wiping butts. And it was a joke. I mean, it was not the easiest time to be able to, but it was an incredible gift. And I think I did the best I could with the resources I had. Next sabbatical time came along, and I did a little bit better. And I learned from everything, and I got a whopping C+, I think, for the next one. It was better, but it was, again, the best I could do with the resources that I had. And so from that belief, I actually realized there are phases here. There's a strong why and a what and a how behind this. And I'm so grateful that some of the disappointment of some of those sabbaticals, I was able to transfer into what we're now doing with sabbatical coaching and identify things for different leaders. And so really some of it comes out of the longing that I want you to experience a better sabbatical than I experienced, even though it was good. It was fine. It was, passing grades. But one of the things, Chad, that I realized is that I actually don't recommend a high capacity leader to go on sabbatical without coaching any longer. Before I thought, you can probably hack it or figure it out yourself. But I just think it's too big of a liability in our world today. We have too much unrealized grief. We're moving so fast. The rate of change is huge. And I just didn't realize how much I was processing in my heart, soul, mind, and even my body until I had the ability to stop and rest. So that's really kind of what leads us to today. And man, I think before we get to the what, I know you're listening, going, what exactly? How do you guys define that? We'll get there. But also the why came out during my own story. And I just saw, first of all, speed. Like, we're just moving so fast. And I'd love to hear you speak into that. What was it like slowing down on sabbatical for you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm so glad that we get to benefit from your struggles on
You're welcome.
Sabbatical journey. Because I would say, walking through coaching, that my sabbatical was an A, and so I'm grateful, and I'm so proud and glad that we get to walk other leaders that would say the same, right? As they're walking through their coaching journey, they come out the other side and say, "Man, that was an incredible experience." But yeah, you're right. One of the things you kept saying to me heading into sabbatical was, Chad, you don't know how tired you are. And you kept saying that, and I really didn't know what that meant until I got to into what we call our experience phase, where I really stopped. I stopped the working. I stopped the laboring. I stopped all of the various things that all of us leaders are so accustomed to doing, and we discipline and set up our lives to maximize our performance. And yet, in the stopping, that's when I really began to feel replenished and enjoy my family at a new level. And to be quite honest, I began to hear God speaking to me, not as a leader, but as a child of God, and discovering that was more than enough. And so it was just a beautiful season of stopping the work and really resting and replenishing. What about you? I'd love to hear from you. Kind of why have you seen the sabbatical is so crucial?
All right, we'll get back to our podcast in just a second, but I want you to be honest. As we're thinking about this conversation and we're talking about, sabbatical and how do we prepare, how do we plan, something I want to touch on is the preparing and planning. You may not be heading for sabbatical, or you may be planning for one, but how do you keep track? How do you prepare? How do you plan? Not just for big events, but how do you prepare and plan for the morning, the afternoon, the day, the week, the month, and the quarter? If you're like me, I used to try and keep it all up here, or randomly write it down, scratch it on Post-it notes, but nothing seemed to work. I'd lose the Post-it notes. I couldn't remember things. I was constantly forgetting. And instead of proactively planning for my days and weeks, I was just reactively responding to it. And that just doesn't work. I was more tired, more frustrated,
and I was being controlled by my schedule versus the other way around. Finally, during a season of leadership coaching, I found something that helped me flip the script. Like again, for years, I used to hate writing things down and having them dictated by tiny little squares. I didn't like it, so I didn't do it. But like I said, after a season of leadership coaching, one tool changed the trajectory of my leadership, and it had the biggest impact. It provided enough structure for me to plan my weeks ahead, riverbanks to keep me in the right direction, with enough freedom to adapt my schedule, to implement a schedule that worked for me, that allowed me to accomplish things quicker, more effectively, with more efficiency. And I was working faster, but felt like I was moving at a more rhythmic pace. Eventually, we turned this tool into the Right Side Up Journal. We're now in our third edition of the Right Side Up Journal, and with that, we've got 3 different options to choose from. I'm holding the paperback version. There is a hardback version, and there's also a digital version for those that like to use Markable, an iPad, or a Kindle Fire tablet. You can get all of the information below. But if you're planning for vacations this summer, you're planning for your weeks ahead, or you're listening to this podcast episode right now and you find yourself planning for a sabbatical, you cannot go wrong with the Right Side Up Journal. It is hands down the most practical value in leadership. The third edition is chock full of videos, all of our best leadership tools. The digital version has links to take you to videos to deep dive and get a better understanding of why we choose to do certain things, why we work certain things, processes to implement, tools to utilize. In the paperback and hardback versions, there's QR codes that you can scan. You can find all the information below. I'll have a link pasted for you, no matter where you are in your life and leadership. There's steps you can take to proactively plan for your days and weeks ahead. And the Right Side Up Journal is the best tool in leadership to help you get from where you are to where you want to be, leading with greater clarity, reduced overwhelm, and more impact. Grab a copy of the Right Side Up Journal, 3rd edition today. Now, back to our podcast.
Yeah. And I remember you sent me a picture from Italy, from this, beautiful hillside, and it was clear that you had heard from God. It was clear that you were enjoying life. You and your wife, Katie, were just kind of relaxing, and you're soaking it in. And you and I are wired up pretty similar in that we don't have to be working, quote unquote, to be working. I can be driving and I have an idea churning in my mind. And that's something I'm super grateful for, how God wired me. But most leaders I find are the same, is that we could be way out of the office. We could be at dinner across from our family and our brains are still going. And so this flowing is actually a discipline there to say, I'm going to intentionally slow down my body, slow down my mind, and a lot of other things follow, really our heart and soul next. Man, it's so crucial. Again, that slowing is the first one. Something just happens in that. The second is a maturing, is that we're so focused on action in the midst of life. We're so focused on career and who we are, even sort of this mirage that is social media and building up this life around us, that we have an immaturity to many areas of our lives, and that suddenly that matures in ways, and that isn't all good. Like, that hurts some, and then some of it does feel really good to be fully present with the family. But like, man, here's an area that I just haven't addressed, and maybe I haven't known to, and so it's connected to the slowing. And so I would just say those 3: the slowing, the maturing, and you said the magic word before, the replenishing, in that we just simply can't recover from everything that we're experiencing every week, and our bodies, minds, hearts, in many ways are waging war each week, and processing through even just news cycles and processing through information in social media. We just don't realize, like you said, how tired you are until you actually get that opportunity. And I had Ruth Haley Barton here on the podcast, and she shaped many of our listeners around the idea of Sabbath. And she shared about her own sabbatical, and she said something that really stuck with me. And she said, sometimes Sabbath isn't enough. And I mean, it almost feels heretical in that, but she said she had been through ailing parents, and she had been through several seasons of change, wondering if the org was going to make it through COVID. And she said, I got to the point where Sabbath just simply wasn't enough. And I think that's a beautiful saying, because it's an invitation to take an honest look at our lives, Chad, and say, what could extended slowing look like? What could extended maturing look like, more than just maturing over, a 24-hour period in that? And what could extended replenishing look like a drip charge? Instead of plugging our phone in 5 times throughout the day to grab a quick 30-minute charge, overnight so that it can last that full next day, doing all the things we need to do on our phone. So those are the big three: the slowing, the maturing, and the replenishing really form our why behind a sabbatical season.
Yeah. Well, in that slowing, I know for me personally, I found that I was able to be present. Perhaps for the first time that I was able to stop all those things, right? I was finally able to be fully present wherever I was, with whatever I was doing, with whoever I was with. And it was just a really beautiful thing. And then I'm getting a little ahead of us, but it began to transform who I am on the backside of sabbatical. But we'll get there little by little. I wonder, I mentioned when I came into sabbatical, I had all these different ideas of what sabbatical was. I wonder for us here at Stay Forth, Al, would you give us a little bit of clarity? How do we define sabbatical?
Yeah, it's super helpful because we'll talk about how we define it and then how we don't define it, because there are several, maybe 6 or 8, kind of things flying around that confuse people about it. And the first one is it's a gift. Like, language is really important. Words shape worlds. And so first of all, the posture of this, it's a gift. And a gift is given with a responsibility to steward. So if it feels like this pressure, like I have to wring every little bit of it out, our posture is already off. But if it's this, somebody gives you a gift card or somebody gives you $500 and says, go use this for your family, you think about it, but it's fun to think, man, what's the best use of this, right? It's a stewardship given with an intention, as opposed to, I better really make this count. So posture really matters, and sort of how we approach it. And so what we say, it's an incredible gift with an incredible responsibility to steward. So the heart of a steward that's not pressurized, but certainly wants to, see the best moments come out of that. Like you said, be present with our family, be present to God, be present in some of the hobbies and things that we love doing and replenishing in that. But what is really, really important for us to see is that it's a gift from God. It may be administered by your organization, but it's a gift from God. So that's the first part of it. But the actual definition, Chad, that we have is a month or more for the purpose of replenishment with the intention to come back stronger. And let me explain that. Why a month or more? There's just something that happened. You probably experienced it 2-3 weeks in. You're thinking, man, this is the longest vacation I've ever been on. And this is great. But we're literally just starting to get to the good stuff. The body's coming down, and maybe you've already been tired and you're starting to get the energy back. Your mind is actually not spinning as much and not creating as many ideas, which feels strange, like it's not working, but it actually is working. You're starting to be more present to your family, and your heart's thawing now. And maybe we're just getting down to our soul, which has been accidentally neglected in the midst of regular, ordinary life and rhythm. And the second word is replenishment. There is that replenishing that which has been lost, that has leaked out in our life, that's been forgotten, that's been neglected. And again, no shame or no guilt there, but there's a lot of good things we love in life that we just forget to do. And so that replenishment, that filling back up so we can pour back out. And then the last one, with the intention to come back stronger. That's really important to us. Chad, you and I do not say yes to sabbatical coaching unless somebody has the intention to come back stronger. We're not in the business of like, oh, let me help somebody find another job and let's just use this as an excuse. And that's the anti-definitions actually of sabbatical is just looking for a job. And so a month or more for the purpose of replenishment with the intention to come back stronger. Man, if you want to take a 3-week vacation, more power to you. I'm a fan of long vacations. Go for it. But let's just not call that a sabbatical. And we'll get into that actually in our next episode next week, is why that actually can't get us to that spot of full replenishment in that. So that's our definition. Any thoughts on that you think are important as a sabbatical coach?
Oh, there's so much there, right? Anything really less than a month is, like you said, is a really great vacation, but that's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about for the purpose of long-term replenishment with this intention to come back stronger. And again, I know for me personally, I'm picking on myself, but I suspect there's probably a lot of leaders like me and us that you develop so much of your life so that you can really perform at the maximum level, which is great. That's wonderful. That means you're probably a really great leader. What you discover on sabbaticals beyond that level of performance, where you really just get to be a child of God first, where you get to be a spouse, you get to be a parent, And then what you discover is in those things, when it's all lined up in the right order, you're an incredible leader because your values are in the right order. You're scheduling your life around your values. And when we say come back stronger, I think that's what we're talking about. All right. Like, it's not just, I'm not just coming back to be a better leader. I'm coming back as a better person, coming back as a better child of God. And that affects everything else that I do. And so what we see when people are walking through the stay forth process is they are truly coming back stronger in so many ways. But I wonder, so that's what it is, right? But what isn't it? I think that's also, like you said, just as important. What isn't sabbatical?
Yeah. Again, back to the posture. We don't take sabbaticals, we receive them. So it isn't your reward. It's a gift. And it isn't something that I think we squeeze every drop out of and, optimize the sabbatical. Like those kind of words that we may use for our work week, we have to be really important in terms of that posture piece of that. So again, because it's a gift, it's not, first of all, a long-term vacation. Again, I'm a fan of long vacations. Schedule for them. I had, a couple of them this last year. I'm a big fan, but it's not just a long vacation where we're just going to sit on the beach all the time. We're just going to do the things that we love. Secondly, it's not punishment. And this is just a really interesting thing. I've heard this, but we put somebody on sabbatical. It's kind of like, man, we gave them this gift to punish them. Like, it doesn't make sense. And this was God's idea. And this is actually this beautiful receiving time. And so it's not a punishment. I'm not a fan of, you can put somebody on leave. You can say, we really need you to work on these things or they're going to hurt you, your family, and this organization. Again, that can be really helpful to give a leader space to deal with certain things, but this is not punishment. The next one, it's not medical leave. It's really interesting. I've heard pastors before say, hey, I have this issue, this health issue. I'm going to go on sabbatical and take care of that. And I'm like, man, I hope our organization would give you time off to take care of your body if you can. There's a leader that was basically going blind. And I remember them saying, I'm going to take sabbatical to deal with this. And I'm like, you need to go to the hospital and just take care of your body. Like, you probably can't do other things if you can't see right now. So that's kind of a bummer when I hear that. The next one, it's not a job search. I don't feel like that's a good integrity move, either for us as sabbatical coaches or for somebody thinking that they intend to come back stronger when they're really looking. Now, have people realize during that slowing that they're in the wrong spot? Yes, but it shouldn't be that motivating factor. Again, give somebody time to look for other jobs, communicate openly. But this is one reason people are afraid of it, is because, you're going to come back and head somewhere else. It's not project time. It's not project time. Something like a book. Chad, you're writing a book right now. You know that it's not easy. It is work. I've written 4 books. It's the academic sabbatical idea is actually not a biblical sabbatical. It's an academic sabbatical, which we know is about tenure and retaining staff and all that. And that's fine for academia. That's not what we're talking about here. This is not time to go write your big book. It's not disengagement. I think it's really important. You're not running from something. You're actually running to something. The formation of identity. You're running to your family. You're running back to being faithfully present where you're at. And like you say, of course, you become a better leader in the midst of this. It's a roots and fruits thing. And so it is a time to engage those different areas that maybe we haven't spent as much time or energy on, or our kids get older. And like, Chad, in different phases, they need different things from us. And it's a chance to give them those different things. The last thing that it's not is a chance to do nothing. That's going to bore a leader. That's going to lead us to some bad places. Boredom does not wear well on most leaders that I know. And so in the planning process, it's very important that there's some significant things going on, actually things that you're excited about, your family's excited about, and you want to receive. Remember, this is a gift. This isn't a beatdown. It's not, how do we do the hardest things I could possibly do, drag my way through sabbatical, hear from God so I could come back? Of course not. But those things I think are helpful. A way that we phrase it that I find, and feel free to speak into this, Chad, is that we live in this we live in this have to world. And so we have to go do this. We have to show up to work. We have to pick up our kids from school, or they're sitting outside in the cold, like have to's of life. And so we call it, it's a get to season amidst a have to routine. And so that get to moment that actually defines a lot of that first day of sabbatical is usually, oh man, I I get to just wake up and be present today. I get to wake up whenever. I get a slow cup of coffee. Many leaders schedule these in the summer so that they're, sleeping in at the same time their kids are or whatever. And so that get to piece that governs a whole lot of what folks do or don't do, even the calls they take, the quote unquote meetings or lunch gatherings. This is a get to meeting, or does this feel like a have to one? Speaking of that, Chad, how's that been helpful as you coach people through sabbatical, that phrase?
Yeah. It's funny. Almost every single time when I'm coaching leaders and I'm walking them through this journey and the process of what it is and what it isn't, when I get to that line, this is a get to season in a have to world. It's like the blinders come off and the light bulb, appears, and people are like, oh, now I get it. And then it's honestly a continual aha moment as they're continuing to prepare, as they're experiencing sabbatical. And then even when they come back and they start thinking, man, I need more of these get to moments in my life.
Yep.
It was a game changer for me in my process. And I see it so much, again, with probably almost every, if not every leader that I get to coach through the sabbatical journey. And, it was a compass for me. When I think back to all the things I wanted to, or I thought I needed to bring into, right, all these have tos that I feel like I have to do during sabbatical. And when you were like, but what do you get to do? Like, what is it that God's really speaking into this season? And I know for me, one of the things was I wanted to be able to say yes to my kids more than I said no. That I was waking up, and we had some really amazing adventures that we went on. And those were great. You don't have to do those things. Some of our best things, I remember jumping on the trampoline with one of my daughters, and we just sort of crashed, and we were looking up at the trees above us. And I don't even remember which one of us it was. I think it was my daughter. It was like, Dad, like root beer floats would be great today. And I was like, you're right. And so the next thing we knew, we were at the grocery store buying root beer floats, and we came back home and had root beer floats for everybody, right? It was a get-to moment. And somebody else one day was like, a picnic would be great. And so we made a picnic, and we got on our bikes and we rode bikes to a nearby pond. And it was a get to season in a have to world, things that our kids look back and say, those were just beautiful moments.
I love that.
I was recently speaking with a leader who unfortunately didn't go through our process. She went on sabbatical several years ago, and we were talking about, life and leadership. I mentioned I was a sabbatical coach, and she sort of, cringed a little bit, and I kind of pressed, like, come on, it seems like you have a story. She said, I went on a sabbatical, and it was the worst 4 weeks of my life.
Yeah, I've heard that so many times.
Oh, my goodness. And she went on this amazing trip. She went to Israel with one of her children. I mean, she did something big, but what I came to find out is she did all these things she felt like she had to do, and she didn't do the things that she, was really needing. It wasn't this get-to season for her.
Yeah. And talk about water a little bit. I remember we were actually having a coaching call, and I remember hearing that trend that for you, water and replenishment were linked. Talk about that.
Yeah, it was one of those beautiful things that both the coaching experience and the slowing experience together brought the aha moment for us, that when my wife and I were traveling in Italy, whether we were in Venice or Florence or Rome, we were constantly finding our way back to the water. Even if it was only a river, like that's where we were like, this is where we want to be tonight. Or we actually got the privilege of taking our kids to Paris. It was a dream of mine, something I promised my kids when they were very little, watching Ratatouille. Someday I'll get you to Paris. And I was able to make good on that promise. But we were on the river in the middle of Paris almost every day, whether it was walking along the river, walking across bridges, riding down the boats. And then even when we got back, like you said, I mentioned a moment ago, we would go on bike rides, and we would picnic beside a pond, or we would go boating on a lake close by. And it was an aha moment of, hey, this is really important. And I actually need to be scheduling the moments around water into our life. It was a beautiful aha moment during the sabbatical experience.
And man, I love the thread there from root beer floats, slow time on, whatever you want to do, on whatever activity you happen into that day, versus we're always watching the clock. Well, I got the next thing, and not all that's bad, right? I have a responsibility to watch the clock, to pick up kids and get them this thing and that thing. And man, I just remember having several of those moments. But without that coaching, and I remember thinking, you always talk about this as a relaxing thing, like you're magnetized to water. And so water's a get to for you. You live in Indiana. There's tons of awesome lakes and, ponds everywhere and whatnot. I live in Colorado. And so for me, so much of that is, man, how do I get to a peak? How do I get to a mountain or just a little bluff or hill and sit there? And just those little get-tos, they're here, they're present. You could get to a lake today. I could get to a little outcropping today with an hour, no problem. But how many times we look over those things because of the have to? And so the number one word that I want to leave us with as we close up this episode is disorienting. Is that in the worst and best ways, it is disorienting. The leader that you describe, I've talked to a dozen of them probably that say, oh, sabbatical was brutal for me. And I don't want to toot our own horns, but say that's literally why we do sabbatical coaching, because we want you to demystify that. You take a leader that's done everything in their life except this. It's the one thing they haven't do, which is intentionally pause. People want it to count, right? Nobody's like evil or wicked heading into sabbatical. They want it to count. They want it to matter. They want to come back better. They want to be replenished. They want to figure out how to be more present. And yet, I think on our own, it's just so hard to do that with the barrage of who our culture generally tells us that we are to be. We're human doings instead of human beings. And so we're fighting for that phrase when we coach people, Chad, that who you are matters more than what you do. Your actual presence, the essence that you have as a dad, the being in the room and being fully locked in actually changes our kids' lives and changes whether it's a congregation or a company, whether it's a nonprofit changing the world, or a lunch that I had with 6 leaders around the table yesterday. Like, our presence deeply matters, and we're living disembodied lives thinking about the next thing many times. And that's true of all of us. I want to leave this with an invitation. Chad and I spend a portion of our week intentionally investing in leaders, and we do 90-minute sessions. We'll talk through these 3 different phases that we keep referencing, and we prepare people for sabbatical. We walk through sabbatical with them, and then maybe the most helpful piece is based on what the Father revealed and who they are becoming. We actually help them reorient to work, to life, to family in that way. And so sabbatical coaching, Chad and I are available for this. And this is something that really kicks up this time of year. If you have one coming up this summer, now is the time to plan. If you have one coming up next summer or a year, 18 months from now, I don't believe you can start too early planning so that it can be as healthy as possible in the process. So below, you'll see that. Also, if you have a question on anything around sabbatical, email us at hello@stayforth.com, HELLO@STAYFORTH.com. Chad and I can answer your questions. Okay, friends, so we're going to build a bridge between that episode of why sabbatical matters and what, and we hope those definitions are helpful. Again, we are not the people who created the idea of sabbatical. It really is this biblical reflection of Sabbath, and it's this beautiful chance to look back and to reflect, to look within, and to sort of get a gauge on where we're at and how healthy are we and what needs tending, and then to look ahead and actually reorient to the ways that we've done things. Chad, this was true for you. You had a major transition and major shift after your sabbatical. How do you think you did that shift or transition differently because you were coming out of that replenishing season?
Yeah, it was incredibly important. And I think one of the myths of sabbatical is that the sabbatical experience is solely that time away, right? And what we like to talk about, and what you really helped me walk through, is there are really 3 phases to sabbatical. That's what we're going to talk about here in the next part of this episode. And being able to name those 3 parts, being able to lean into them fully. I was able to prepare well, lean into the experience, and then coming out of it, I was really able to reorient to a new way of living and leading. I had a lot of question marks coming out of sabbatical because I was transitioning out of a role and out of an organization I started and led, and kind of into a little bit of the unknown. But the phases gave me a lot of clarity of, no, this is the season I'm in. This is the category of sabbatical I'm in. So I not only came out knowing a lot more about myself, but I had a lot of clarity on the phase that I was in. So I was able to lean into it fully and have great clarity. Part of what we like to do as leaders is jump ahead. And it prevented me from jumping ahead to be fully present where I was, which gave me a lot of clarity moving out of sabbatical into what we like to call the reorientation phase.
This by far has been the most helpful thing we do as we coach leaders and help guide them through their sabbatical, is to name, where are you? What phase are you in? And so these three phases of prepare, experience, and reorient we lay out here in this episode. As you listen to this, I want to remind you that sabbatical is engagement, not escape. You are engaging in the deep things in your body, in your heart, in your mind, in your soul, and in the relationships in your life. This is not just an escape from life. That actually would not be very helpful and would be quite dangerous, actually, for a leader. This is engaging in the right things that maybe work has impeded from. And I'm telling you, we have not seen a sabbatical go really poorly yet, because we're preparing well, we're walking with them, people are making intentional, proactive decisions, and then we are there in those hard or challenging moments where they need somebody to talk through. And that is our great joy as sabbatical coaches. So enjoy this episode of demystifying, again, what are these three phases of a healthy sabbatical? This is a really interesting topic for me. I promise I've sort of backed my way into sabbatical coaching, and Chad, you have as well in a really unique way, and I'll have him share that as well. But I approached this topic actually first as a struggler. I had no idea how to steward the two sabbaticals that I was granted. I served as a pastor for about 13 years, as well as equipping church planners, and that's actually when I got into coaching, was during my time pastoring and developing leaders in a local church context. And what I realized during that time was that one of the most terrifying things to a leader is to say, go do whatever you want. Just go take time off. And how much of an identity hit that can be for us when we're not working. And that word disorienting that we talk a lot about, we'll talk about in this episode, it was incredibly disorienting to me. And so during those two experiences of sabbatical, the first one I did the best I could and kind of got a low C. The second I did the best I could and kind of got a high C. That's when I believe God gave me the vision for walking alongside of people and guiding them before a sabbatical, during a sabbatical, and after a sabbatical. And I don't know what your opinion is as you watch or you listen to this, but plenty of leaders have had bad experiences with a sabbatical, and almost all of them have been alone, isolated, and confused about the role of a sabbatical and unsure of actually how to best steward it. And I'm proud to say that Chad and I have helped people prepare and experience a sabbatical that has helped them to reorient in a really healthy way. So that's kind of my entrance to sabbatical. Chad, talk a little bit about how did you first experience sabbatical and then sabbatical coaching?
Yeah, I've kind of come into this sabbatical journey from an interesting and I think in many ways surprising as well. After 21 years of ministry and marriage, and really the 5 years leading into that sabbatical, I was a church planning pastor. Really came into it, coasting on fumes, so to speak, and knowing that we were, as a family, ready for a break. Ready for kind of some next steps and ready to really engage one another and engage God at a higher level, and just quite honestly find some real rest and replenishment. And so you and I were actually already walking through a coaching journey, and as I was beginning to share my desire to step into a meaningful sabbatical, it was then that I discovered how powerful a sabbatical coach can be. Me, like many people, I had no idea really what to do. I had some idea, and we'll talk about some of the things we often bring in that perhaps we should leave behind. And I had all of those, just like everybody else: the questions, the fears, the things I thought had to be there that perhaps don't need to be a part of the journey. And while you would say you kind of had some mid-level experiences, having the opportunity to learn from your experience and your opportunities to coach so many other leaders, I would say I had an A.
Yours was amazing. You're sending me pictures from Italy, and I'm going, oh man, I really wish I would have had the experience you had. So I was a little bit jealous while you were experiencing it.
I can imagine. Yeah. Getting to take my bride to Italy for a couple of weeks, getting to take our 3 kids to Paris, for about a week and a half, and just even back in the States, just having incredibly meaningful experiences just right here in our own town. It was a great, great opportunity, not just to travel the world to get rest, but to really reset in life and leadership. And I can easily and honestly say I'm not the same person I was before sabbatical, because of the things that I was able to glean out of it. And so it was really an incredibly beneficial journey. I'm still a pastor, and having had the opportunity to walk through a meaningful sabbatical, I would say almost weekly, if not sometimes daily, I will get other pastors and leaders reaching out to me and say, tell me what you did. How did you do it? What was your journey? And through Stay Forth, I've had this kind of surprising part, the opportunity now to walk dozens of other leaders through their sabbatical journey. And like leader after leader, they come in and you can just see it on their faces, right? There's a desire, there's an inherent knowledge of, I need something. Somebody's gifted me some level of sabbatical, whether it might be 4 weeks or, 90 days plus, but they don't know what to do with it. And there's a lot of things that they're bringing in that almost feels like a burden. Well, I've got to do this, and I've got to read these books, and I've got to go have these experiences so I can report back to my board. And we really just try to walk with them through, what is it that God most wants to do in you in this season? Because he's the one that's providing the gift. And it's been amazing to walk along dozens of other leaders and help them get that experience as well.
Absolutely. And so let me brief you for kind of what we're going to do. Chad and I are going to ping pong back and forth. Again, we're both sabbatical coaches. We both experienced sabbaticals, and we see it from slightly different angles, but we walk people through the same process that has been time tested. If you're a business leader, this works for you. If you are between professions, this works for you. If you are 52 years old, approaching a season where you want to look at your second mountain, this works. If you're 38, approaching the season, this works. So we've created what I think is able to contextualize and able to generalize well enough. So we're going to walk through a little bit why, what's behind it. We're actually going to walk through 3 phases of sabbatical, which is probably the most helpful thing people say about our sabbatical coaching. That's kind of the lay of land, and we're going to dive into this. So Chad, let's do it.
Yeah, well, before we talk about sabbatical, of course, we've got to start with the why. And I think part of what we try to do in our journey, and I think it's been so helpful, is just to demystify the process, right? And so, Alan, can you kind of share with us, what do we share with our clients and often churches and businesses? Why does sabbatical matter?
It's so important for us to pull out of what leaders call the whirlwind of decisions and emails, and I'm always leading everything. Leaders tell me a lot. Everyone needs me all the time. And if you think about that, if you lead, if you are a parent, you are making decisions more than you want to. You're answering emails more than you want to. You're administrating more than you want to. And there's something about extracting the leader out of that zone and the grind of duty, and then propelling them into a space of delight. I actually talked with a leader yesterday. He and his wife, they're both receiving a sabbatical right now, and they were just wrestling through, what should we do in micro? And I was inviting them into delight. Who would you like to get together with? And what are a couple things that you'd love to do as a married couple? And what are some things that you've kind of been held back from? What are some coffee shops you'd love to go visit? What are some books you'd love to read? And it feels disorienting even to this leader in the midst of that. The second thing is just a margin in space. Our brains and our hearts and our souls need margin and space to just get out of that whirlwind if we're going to kind of zoom out and we're going to look at, and what is my purpose? What is my calling? Why did God put me here on this earth? What is this season for? And what is the next season for? And that's the next why behind it, is every leader needs to mature in our leadership and mature in our parenting, in our life phase and stage. And this gives us a chance. Many leaders that receive a sabbatical go, man, I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to pray and think and read and process. What does the next season require of me? And it kind of helps you to just name the last season, to move on from that, and then to be able to prepare for the next season. replenishment is the big word that we talk about. What's dry and must be replenished? And so we're going to come at it with that question ahead of time. What feels dry and must be replenished? And it could be your body, could be your mind, could be your heart, your soul, relationships around you, your parenting. If you're a spiritual leader, you could look forward to not having to preach and teach. If you are an organizational leader, you could look forward to not having to lead meetings or always think about content you need to be producing for your organization. The last benefit that I see is actually the biggest secret of sabbatical, and we're going to tell you right here, is that your absence as a leader in the organization, if you prepare well, can actually raise the capacity of your team. I see this with my kids, that they come to me for random tasks. This is not a joke. A couple days ago, my son yells up, "Dad, there's a mouse downstairs here." Well, unfortunately, this happens in our house, and they know how to do it. You go upstairs, you grab a snowboarding glove, you take it downstairs, not hard. You trap the thing, you take it outside. But if I'm there, they're not going to do that. And so I don't want my kid to not rise to his capacity of capturing a mouse downstairs in the bathroom. Same thing is true for a team. When that leader is gone, maybe the team has to rise 20% and they have to take on new responsibilities. And strangely, those are some of the same responsibilities that the leader wants to shed, and somebody else grows into them when they're gone. And so it's this beautiful kind of reordering of capacity, and even sometimes the structure of the organization where you want to grow into a different or a more mature role. So yeah, Chad, any thoughts on all those? It's kind of the big five that we talk about.
I'm reminded of a leader that I had the privilege of talking with, and she's the leader of her organization. And each time she's taken a maternity leave, what she shared with me was that the preparation for her to be out, the time that she was away in her re-entry process, and in all facets, she discovered that not only did she get better, but her organization got better, and actually their profits went up. And it's begun to significantly change. She was reaching out to us to say, "Hey, what is this sabbatical process that you all actually walk through?" She was kind of talking about her her maternity leave as sabbatical. And I was like, well, we wouldn't call maternity leave sabbatical, but the principle is true, right? This idea of preparation and inviting others to step up in your absence, it's really true across the board, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit. And you mentioned there at the beginning that idea of escaping the grind of duty. I see it on our clients' faces every single time we start the process with them. And we kind of walk through this idea of get to versus have to. And you just see this freedom begin to emerge in them of, oh, there are things that I can let go and things that I get to step into. Even the language that you continually use of receiving a sabbatical. We don't talk about taking a sabbatical. It's a gift that we receive. And we talk about this idea of what do it look like for you to receive this gift and walk in get-tos. And when we help people rediscover, I don't think this is a word, but one of the things I often say with our clients is kind of your childness, that you are a child of God first, and everything else flows from that. When you get to rediscover that and rediscover the ways in which you're designed and what replenishes you, all bets are off. And it's amazing what is in store.
That's such a good word, Chad. And one of the unintended consequences, the kind of side effects of leadership, is that we kind of end up leading everything. And we kind of end up having responsibility in all the zones that we step into, maybe in the community, maybe in boards. And if you're a leader listening and watching this, chances are you need spaces to just be. Whether we do that on some of our experiences where we're like, we have all the details, just come with us to Colorado. Just come be for a while. That's a gift. And the leader that is leading all the time does not get that opportunity to experience that. So giving someone that opportunity is disorienting and challenging to, you say this get to, like, have your hands open versus your hands full or clenched, but just, God, what do you have for me today? And we give just enough planning and structure to that, but we also have that space and that margin. And it's a dance, it's a tension, it's an art, not a science. Every sabbatical is a little bit unique. And the situation, your situation was unique, Chad. My situation was unique both times with both biological and adopted kids. And I'm actually planning for my next sabbatical that I'm really looking forward to this year that's completely different from when my kids were younger in that phase, and I'm having to contextualize it for this unique scenario. So there's not one size fits all, and I think that's the beauty of coaching, is helping you uncover some of the uniquenesses that you need to pay attention to during your sabbatical.
That's so good, Alan. So good. Well, as we continue to kind of pull back the veil, that's a little bit of the why. What's the what? Like, what is a sabbatical?
Yeah, it's really important for us to define it, because frankly, we've thrown the word sabbatical around, and sometimes it's actually not sabbatical, it's medical leave. It's actually disciplinary, and someone needs to be put on disciplinary leave if they've violated something morally or something in the organization. Maybe they even need to kind of be investigated for something. And so all those things are appropriate actions sometimes for an organization. They're just not sabbatical. And so we're very clear on this definition that the first thing is it's a month or more. And we love it when it's more. I'd love to see it an 8 to 12 week range if it can be. But at least a month. And the purpose of that is to be away from your primary work. So I say primary work because you may have a side kind of thing that you do. You may have something else you need to maintain, but it's your primary work. So a month or more away from your primary work with the intention to replenish. That's very, very important, not the intention to go do other work. Chad and I are currently writing books, my friends. That is not rest. That is not replenishment. That is other work. And so with the intention to replenish and the intention to come back stronger, it's really important. And so those four, again, a month or more. We'd love for it to be more, but a month is the minimum. Away from your primary work, proactively away from your primary work. And then with the intention to both replenish, again, refill what is dry within you and your life and your leadership, and the intention to come back stronger. This is not about, I'm looking for my next job and I'm between jobs here, and I'm actually going to come back and then resign. Nobody knows it. That to us is not the kind of sabbatical that we are in. And if those four things are present, we'd love to accompany you on your sabbatical journey.
And I think one of the things that I've discovered that was both helpful to me in walking through the process with you and then helping others walk through the journey, we talk about this a lot in our leadership coaching, is just naming things, right? When we name things, we give ourselves permission to step into them. I don't think our names are anything magical, but the fact that we name the 3 phases of sabbatical, I think, is incredibly important because it helps leaders know where they are at in the journey. And we even sometimes will drop down within the sabbatical and kind of like, little by little kind of name whether it's the week or the phase within it, just to help people feel the permission, these get-tos. But we have 3 phases of what we like to walk through with our clients, 3 phases of a sabbatical. I'll kind of share what they are, and then I'll drop down a little bit into a bit of the details. The 3 phases are simply this. There's the preparation, the experience, and then the reorientation. And all 3 are critically important to a highly high quality sabbatical that also leads a leader not only to have a great time, but as Alan just said, to come back replenished and stronger, and that the organization also gets stronger in the process. And so in the preparation phase, we're really after a few things. We want to help the leader begin to discover, like, what are they going to do on the sabbatical? What is that going to look like? And so we really drop down and begin to kind of help them rediscover, in many cases, what is it that brings them to life. And what we've found, whether it's men or it's women, and as Al was saying earlier, for-profit, nonprofit, in different ages and stages of life, leaders get busy and they often forget what brings them to life. And so part of the preparation phase is just beginning to explore this with them. I was talking with a leader yesterday, and she was just sharing with me, I don't know. Like, I don't know how to rest anymore. And I don't even know what kind of recreation I enjoy. And one of the words we like to use is, oh, well, then let's experiment. Let's just try some things. Let's just see. What's something you've always thought about? Let's just experiment. It doesn't have to be a hobby that you're stuck to for life. You don't have to go out and spend the thousands of dollars. Let's just try it. Let's just try it. So we want to help the leader begin to explore some things that are going to be beneficial to them. Oftentimes the leader is married, has a family, and so we want to talk about that process as well. What's this going to look like for your spouse? What's this going to look like for your children? Will they have the opportunity to be involved? And if so, what will that look like for them and for you to both be replenished and to come back stronger? And then, of course, we want to help your organization be prepared as well. And so we walk with you in the process of like, what does it look like, depending on your role within the organization, to hand off things well. For you to have a great sabbatical, things have to be handed off well. So we'll walk with you in that journey. Some leaders do a great job with this. Some need a little bit of help. And we want to walk with you to make sure that your organization has great clarity on what it is that they're going to need to do in your absence. If they have clarity, then they're going to be able to succeed. And here's the other bonus: they won't be calling you on sabbatical. Everybody wins. That's the preparation phase.
Let me stop you before we get into the experience phase right there. What we say is that it's actually the most important phase of sabbatical, because you said if everybody wins, and I laugh because when we do it poorly, everyone loses. You're thinking back about work. Your family is distracted because they lose you there. Your team doesn't want to bother you while you're on sabbatical, and yet they have to. And so I've seen that before of, oh, we didn't know what decisions were made and all that. And friends, I just want to tell you, like, it's not our most fun phase. It's certainly not my most fun phase. I love the experience phase. Just getting to hear, I remember Chad, getting to hear about your both incredible trips and just like, let's go down and take a walk around the lake. And I just want to hear, like, how is God shaping you? How are you as a dad, as a husband, growing as a person during this time? That's my favorite. But what I know is most critical is the prepare phase. So all of that sets the tone for the experience phase. So talk about that experience phase. What's a leader generally experiencing during this time?
Yeah, they're really looking at with what we see them sharing back with us is there is restoration, of their soul. There's contemplation, there's replenishment, whether it's heart, soul, mind, body, relationships. We just see them throughout. I was, again, this leader I was talking with yesterday. They've been on sabbatical for 10 days. They went away, they came back, and they said, 2 people that are incredibly important in my life, they saw my face and said, you're already different. Just because they stepped into it in such a meaningful way. And that's what we want to see. And they still have 6 weeks left. So not only will their outside be different, but their inside is going to be different by the time they get through this process. And as we look at replenishment, I think one of the things we like to help leaders see, especially spiritual leaders, but really this goes for anyone, is that, of course, we agree and believe that God is the source of replenishment. But what people forget is that God has many tools in his tool belt, right? There are a lot of tools inside the toolbox. And we often say that some of his tools are sleep, space, play, life-giving relationships, prayer, curiosity. I was mentioning a moment ago, like, let's experiment, let's try. Gaining clarity, getting out in creation, even limits, whatever, if it's a 4-week sabbatical or 90 days, whether you have a large budget or a small budget, even limits themselves are gifts from God of what it is that we need to partake in. And so some of that, like I said, is in the preparation phase, but we often find as we get into the experience phase that leaders still want to they need help gaining clarity on what is it that I should be doing with my days? How do I set up my weeks? And then part of what we get to do on the coaching side is to listen really well to hear, like, what is most life-giving? What are these themes that you're coming up with? As I was walking through mine, Alan said, man, I feel like every time we talk, you mention water. Like when you were in Italy, you were along the rivers. When you were in Paris, like you were along the river. When you were back in the States, you were going to lakes, whatever it was, right? And honestly, I had never thought about it. And here on the backside, that's become a new rhythm for me. Often when I'm with my clients, I'll talk about the big rocks, right? It's a big rock for me. I can't get on a plane and jump across the globe, but I can get on a bike and go down to a nearby lake. I can hop in my car and go boating, right? And so those are things that bring life to me. Just as a child of God, that's how he designed me. And so part of what we're doing as a sabbatical coach, and I love doing this, is we're processing the disorienting joys. That seems like a phrase that can't go together, but it does. Things are disorienting, and that can be and often is joyful. process. Sometimes leaders might be going through, a detox phase as well. And so there's might be some painful emotions that come with pulling away. It's a strange thing to stop, and yet the world keeps going on without you.
Yeah. And it's exciting, hard. Yeah. Like you said, grieving and terrifying. And it's like the tension of both of those. It can be hard to even wake up and go like, man, my only job today is to get some rest, to go do something fun, and then to be with my family. That is good. But that's, I think, part of that disorienting. It's just weird.
And I think some leaders, again, I think most probably grieve it to some point at first. But when they wake up, day 7, day 10, and they're not needed, that they don't have the phone ringing off the hook and the emails and the messages, there's a real joy in that. I just get to be. And it's so powerful.
I want to kind of dive into what you're talking about there. Dive into the water, if you will. As I noticed the water piece for you, it doesn't feel very spiritual to go on a boat, go on a bike ride. Is this kind of something you naturally do? Indiana's got some great lakes, where you live. And so often people try to over spiritualize it and think, man, I got to go to a monastery. I have to do a long fast. I have to do something that feels really spiritual. And yet I would just watch you talk about these experiences that, to me, that is incredibly spiritual for you to come back alive. And so what we try to do as sabbatical coaches is also kind of normalize and shine a light on, maybe put a mirror to the things that are actually quite life-giving to you, but you sort of think don't count. You're like, oh, I have to, whatever, read a lot of books, grow in this way, pray for 4 hours a day. And we're like, you also need to rest and sleep in. And you also need to reconnect. We talk about these 5 R's, and one of them is reconnect with maybe things that have been awesome for you, but you just fallen out of love with, whether that was, biking, fly fishing, or going to a monastery. Like any of those can be spiritual. So that's one of the things that we want to, Chad said, demystify. We want to demystify even like what makes you tick. And we watch leaders come to life when they see maybe, just maybe, God put this desire inside of me. And that's why I come alive when I do this. Any thoughts on that, Chad?
Yeah, it's so important. I know it's true for me, and I find it to be true for so many leaders that we get to walk alongside, that so much of what we are doing as leaders is so that, fill in the blank, so that I can be a better leader, so that I can maximize my leadership, so I can get the best profits or the best experiences for my church. I can preach the best messages, whatever that might be. And I think what we find with sabbatical, when people are recognizing, oh, this is how I'm designed, this is how I'm made, and when I engage these, I just rediscover who I am as a child of God first, and that's enough. And then you become a better leader, you become a better spouse, you become a better parent, you become a better friend. But it really has to start with that first. I'm a child of God.
So those experiences, that's a lot. And then people start to 2, 3, 4 weeks from coming back go, oh man, I head back to life. And that leads us into what I think is the most challenging phase, but has the most potential for life change, is a reorientation. Chad, describe what that is.
It is very much an interesting shift that has to take place. And if we do sabbatical right, I think there will be a bit of a surprise moment of, oh yes, this has to come to an end, or even a grief. I think that's very common with leaders that did their sabbatical very well, of not wanting that journey to end. And so part of what we are trying to accomplish is, so what would it look like to carry these gleanings forward? Things you rediscovered about yourself, you rediscovered about who you are as a child of God, what you rediscovered about God, your spouse, your children, of what it is that you, when you were at a better pace in life, what is it that you want to take forward? Of course, you're going to have to get back into some new rhythms. Okay, so what would it look like for those rhythms to actually be new? And that's what we want to walk with people. I used the big rock analogy earlier, and I really try to work on that with our clients is, what did you discover that brought you to life that need to be equally important if not more so, when you get back. I've run in I'm sure some of our listeners could attest to this. Ran into some great leaders along the way in our leadership coaching, that they're really good at the end of one week preparing for the next week. You know, they'll sit down, they have a meeting with themselves, they've read those books, right? I know that I need to contemplate this week what I want to accomplish next week. But what we almost never do is stop at the end of one week to look ahead to the next week or the next month and say, what things am I going to put out there that will bring me to life? What are those big rocks? What are those things that are how I was designed? I want to carry those things forward. And that's what we really want to help, so that sabbatical isn't just something that was in the past, but the sabbatical is part of who you are. It moves forward into your weekly Sabbath rhythm. It just becomes a part of your journey. It's now been nearly a couple of years since I've been on the backside of my sabbatical. And of course, there have been, stressful seasons and busy seasons. Alan and I were just catching up for a moment before the podcast. And he's like, so how are you? I'm like, it's a full season of life and leadership. But my soul is well, because I'm continuing to put these big rocks back into my life and my schedule, and making sure those things are going in first, because everything else follows. I'm sure you found this to be true in your own life, Alan, and you've probably seen it in other clients. But I consistently hear from people that have done sabbaticals well, when I came back, I worked less and had more fruit and impact. We just see it so many times, because they're learning to lead. I think there's probably not a better way to say it, just from the inside out, right? That they're taking care of themselves, and it's just coming out of who they are, and they don't have to put in the 60, 80 hours a week every week to get the results. In fact, what they're discovering is they're working at a better pace and getting better results than they ever have. So the reorientation phase is tough, because you've looked so forward to getting into the experience. But what I love seeing in our clients is what they discovered about themselves, and then bringing those things forward into the reorientation phase.
Yeah. I think the lie here is you head back to work is, that was a nice vacation. Now I'm going to head back to the grind. And you are a new person. You are a new creation. You find new rhythms. And then we have this idea that we can design life different. And we actually help you operationalize that idea. Yes, you can. And you don't have to head back to exactly what you did ahead of time. And so kind of re-adding those things, we talk about a slow re-entry. And I find this is really the payoff for sabbatical isn't just the gift of that time away. It's the gift of going, man, I feel like I have more fruit now, but I'm doing it in a way, like you say, that doesn't feel as heavy. And I always talk about what's a lighter way to lead? How could we lead lighter? And man, it's amazing. We don't have all that garbage in your pack, or even just all that responsibility. And we're learning how to lead in that way. That's certainly what we're after. It's not just for you to have a great 2 months away, 3 months away, but for those 3 months to inordinately shape or impact the rest of your life. Friends, we're going to sign out here. And we hope, whether you are watching this on YouTube or whether you're listening to this, we hope that this has been helpful for you. But I believe that there's somebody behind you that needs this. Maybe you're listening to this and your spouse is thinking about sabbatical and it scares the heck out of you. Maybe you have a friend that brought up the idea of sabbatical. I have heard people that have kicked the idea of sabbatical down the road for 2, 3, or 4 years before they actually were ready to receive it. And maybe there's so much fear brewing in you. But we hope that this has simplified and clarified what sabbatical is, why it matters, and how these 3 phases can actually help you view a healthy sabbatical. But friends, I no longer say that it's wise for somebody to enter sabbatical on their own. I'm planning a short sabbatical later this year, and I will have a coach that's walking alongside of me, because in isolation, we don't grow how we can in community. And so Chad and I, and in the future, we plan on having more sabbatical coaches who journey through this together. We are available to walk through sabbatical with you as a guide. And so we can share the specifics of that later, but here's what I want to do. The call to action is for you to head on over to stayforth.com. You can click on our coaching page and just take a look at sabbatical coaching. It's easy to schedule right from there, a breakthrough session, and you can sit with Chad. You can sit with me, and you can talk through some of your challenges. You can talk through when you're thinking about this, your vision for sabbatical, and we will help you to be able to clarify that. We've got some tools. Anybody who approaches us, we are going to share this tool called the Sabbatical Roadmap, outlining these three phases of this. And so we would love to walk through your sabbatical with you. Please connect us with somebody you know. I just connected with 4 leaders at an event recently who are considering sabbatical. I just had a leader who's on sabbatical. Come visit me in Colorado when we explored the topography of this beautiful land as we explored the topography of the soul together. So friends, we'd love to walk alongside of you. Sabbatical is way too important, and your family is way too important to walk alone and ultimately to live in isolation. We want you to live and lead healthy for the long haul. We believe sabbatical is an incredible tool, and for whatever reason, God has invited us to be sabbatical coaches, and we absolutely love watching the transformation happen. So we'd love to have a session with you one-on-one. Just head on over to stayforth.com, and you can book a breakthrough session with Chad or I, and let's break through your thinking, your vision, your ideas, and even some of your dreams for your sabbatical. We hope to see you there.